Alright guys, so this is my first ever tutorial, and the first thing I will be doing is showing you guys how it is that me right here, sculpts muscle definition. And there's about 3 different steps that I usually do. I'm going to show you the first step right now, and then we'll move on to the second and third and etc. And then finishing up and how to make the thing look smooth and all that. So here's the first step. I already got most of the first step done, which is basically scrapping and cutting away at a lot of the bulk. So let's say we had like the Deadpool here. If you pay attention to the Deadpool figure, Mayfeg's Deadpool figure, this is a bootleg though, but yeah, there's a lot of unnecessary bulk. The chest for Deadpool was a lot lower down here, and then he had like a bit of a upper abdominal section that was a lot lower around here. I cut up here, and then I shaved down a lot of the chest with a Dremel. I just took a Dremel to it. I marked it kind of like how I marked it right here with a like pen, and I just kind of dremeled it down until I got to where I was satisfied with. This, if you can already tell, is a new Red Hood that I'll be making. Here's the old one. I try to copy as much as I can with the chest definition. Oh shoot, not focusing. But yeah, it's still a little low, so I'm definitely going to pick it up a little bit higher for the chest. If you can see, it's right here. The dip is your pectoral. The pectorals is a little too low, so I'm going to try to tighten it up a little bit higher and all that to kind of match this. And of course, I'll be using a Mayfex figure as reference since I have so many already. But yeah, so that's like one of the main first things, which is dremeling away as much material as you can. I'll be doing the same thing for the back here, dremeling away a lot of the back muscles, the lats and all that, the rhomboids, all that. It's dremeling all that away. And then the second thing I do, which is cutting away at pieces, I use a really sharp X-Acto, fresh X-Acto, and I do this right here. This is me cutting away at a lot of the muscle definition. So what I will first do, of course, take my little pen. Well, this is a inking pen for like drawing and stuff. And what I would do is I would just like draw the muscle definition. So like kind of like this, right? So there's your upper ab, one of the upper abs. And what I would do is I would take very sharp X-Acto, and then I would start carving away. So I would go in an angle, maybe 45 degrees, kind of a guess, like so, right? And then I flip it over, and I do the same thing again, 45-ish degrees, and cut away at the material. Then I go in for second or third pass. I think this one only requires about 2 passes. I think we should be good. And then it'll leave like a flap of like plastic that I then just pull away at and kind of get rid of. There you go. And it will leave this kind of engraved line, kind of like the rest of the abdominals here. So there's these engraved sections here. It doesn't have to be pretty, because it's going to be covered up in the second stage, which will be bulking. That'll be the second stage. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, this is right now, it's just the cutting down and getting rid of phase. So we're going to do a little bit more cutting away. So if you see here, it's a little bit thicker compared to this side. So we got to cut away a little bit more of material. Let me just get in there. Okay, can you see this? Yeah, you guys can. You can see it. You can 100% see it. You gotta make sure you also use the tip as much as possible, because it's probably the pointiest and sharpest side, so it'll give you a lot more material cuttage. Is that the way to say it? I don't know. Material cuttage. Sounds about right. But yeah. Okay, yeah, so it leaves you with these little plastic flaps, and you just kind of just scrape it off. And then you got that big gap right there. Just like that. Right? And then, so the thing about these areas here, which I'm guessing is supposed to be lower obliques. You know, I think that should be the lower obliques. I'm not too sure, man. Jim Lee muscle definition is really weird. But yeah, so what you want to do, because this area right here is very curved and roundish. Here, let me pull up, let me get, there we go, Batman. Okay, so Batman here, right, if you look, it's very kind of curvish. It's got like this kind of curve to it, and it's like not so like straight, it's like circular. Let me get something that won't scratch him up too bad. Not exactly. Okay, so if you look here, it's got this kind of like round. It's not like blocky. It's more of a little bit of a roundish kind of thing. Same thing for the abs here, kind of a roundish thing. So what we need to do is to simulate that with the cutting. So if you look here, I kind of already did that in the bottom here. See, it's not straight. It's kind of like curved right here. Kind of got that curve. And we need to simulate that up here because it's a little too blocky. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go in this corner and just kind of chop away just a bit at the material to kind of get that little bit of a better curve. Now you see it's got a bit of a curve to the edge. This side kind of blocky as well. So we're going to go in and just manually create that curve with the X-Acto. Like I said, it doesn't have to be pretty because we will be fixing it up during the bulking stage, second stage, and all that. Yeah, now it's got that bit of a curve to it, and it looks pretty good to me. In here, right here, I cut out a lot, like a big, huge gap, just to accommodate for the bulking phase, right? Because, you know, the bulking phase is when you're just putting in a lot of material and you want to make sure you got enough to create good looking sculpts and all that. But yeah, so that's just the quick cutting phase. You know, I'll do a little more. Why not? Let's do a little more teaching here. Okay, so this is probably going to be the next part that I'll do. And if you pay attention to the abdominals here with Batman, you notice that there's kind of specific curves. See, there's like a curve that dips up pretty high, but over here it's kind of a low curve. And you pull the belt down a little bit, it's a bit of a higher curve, and the middle one's just kind of lower, right? So we want to kind of create this now during the cutting phase because it saves time later on, and it'll just make it easier for you. So what we're probably going to be doing is taking away material, kind of like in the middle here, right? Kind of like in the middle here. What we're probably going to do is going to start probably right here. Yeah, this spot looks pretty good. And we're just going to start cutting away that material. This just gives enough space, along with trying to help with creating that curve that I was just talking about. But yeah, it helps create that curve and give you enough space later on for the bulking phase. But yeah, just like that. Let's kind of create that bit of a gap there. I'll be shaving down a little bit more over here in a moment, but I won't record that. But yeah, if you look here, see it's very, very flat, right? And if you remember, there was a big dip on top, but then it slowly came in a little bit on the top over here. So we're probably going to have to remove some material here. Oh, sorry about that. And then a little more material in the middle here, and just a little bit down there. It can be bulked up later during the bulking phase, but we just want to remove material right now just to make it easier. But yeah, that's pretty good for me right now. I'll pause here and then show you what the finished product will be later. Okay, so I just went through all the cutting phase. You see here, it looks a lot different compared to earlier. So let me explain what I've done. So if you remember what I talked about earlier, for the abs, like the shape of how it would be like, the upper would be a little bit thicker or a little higher compared to the mid, and the mid would be shorter than both the lower and upper abdominals. So I kind of got that down. And that's just by carving out a crap ton from the middle and then leaving more material on these parts. I also went in and carved in a very deep crevice in here. And I've gotten most of the shape down. Like this is like most of the shape of what the abdominals what I'm looking at. Here, let me bring up Batman. So here's Bats, and then here's my abs, right? It's pretty close. There's just a lot more material in here. And it's a lot smoother in these crevices. See, if you see here, not much of a crevice, and there's a lot deeper of a crevice here. This can be achieved during the bulking phase, which is why, where's the abs? Why I carved up so much space here so I could put in material and just kind of fill it out and match it up with Batman over there as much as I possibly can. So yeah, the more work you do here in terms of the cutting phase, the easier it is later in the bulking phase. So yeah, I've done most of the work here. So when it comes to the bulking phase, which is next, it'll be a lot easier for me to, you know, match it with the Jim Lee style, which is what I'm trying to go for. But yeah, that's basically the cutting phase. And now we're going to move on to the bulking phase. Okay, so welcome back to the next part of the tutorial. I think it's been like a couple of days since I filmed the last part, whatever. So what I've done so far, you last saw I was going through the cutting phase, and I got a lot of things chipped out and all that stuff. Something I didn't show was sanding down a lot of the rough areas. If you see, it's kind of smooth here and there. That was done with some just normal 400 grit sandpaper. I didn't sand everything down because I will be smoothing over with some epoxy sculpt and stuff like that. I'll be filling this in as well. Here's another part. Here we go. Here's the other thigh. So yeah, see how it's smoothed out in areas? Yeah, I just hit it with some normal 400 grit sandpaper. Let me get the sandpaper really quick. This is the brand right here. Duragold. Duragold. Got off Amazon. Just search that name up and you'll find it. 400 grit sandpaper. But yeah. So I also sanded a few spots here and there where these kind of like tubing like things were kind of chilling on Deadpool's like pants and stuff. And here is the abs section. So yeah, a little different from what we saw last time. I smoothed out all the side areas with the sandpaper to get it all smoothed out, just to make less work for me later on. But yeah, abs are still the same, this area here. We will now be going into the sculpting slash filling phase. So like you see here. Oh yeah, I've also marked out all the musculature here. So let me grab some here. So in the Jim Lee style, like if you grab any kind of the Mafex Jim Lee figures, they got like these big old mid-back sections, and then a lot of these like rear back areas, and then they have the lats that chill around here that kind of come out a little bit further. So I'll be extending the lats here. I forgot what these are called, the muscle area, but whatnot. But yeah, I'll be just sculpting in these kind of things. So this is what I usually do, is I draw in the general area, and I'll start with only one side, because if you do both sides at the same time, you lose gripping space. Like, see, if I like grip here, I have like, you know, area to sculpt, and it'll just make it easier for the maneuver. But if I like sculpted the whole thing, I have to hold it like this, and you know, sometimes it gets tricky and stuff like that. So it's just better to always start with just one side. So I'll be starting probably just the right side here, and I'll just be getting the mid, then wing my way outwards and expanding the lats and all that. And then same thing for the front here. I'll probably start with the right side too. The chest is pretty well shaped. I like the height here and the curve, but I do want it to extend out a bit more because it looks pretty flat. It looks like a really flat chest, like he has no upper chest whatsoever, but he has a lot of lower chest. So I want to get this a little bit higher up just to make it look more bulky. And then, you know, give him his 8 packs up here, because for some reason they have like an extra pack that sits up here for some reason. And I'll get the obliques sculpted in, you know, all 6 of them. I think it's about, should be 6, let me see. Yeah, there's like 6. There's like 3 in the front and then 3 in the back here that then connect into the lats and stuff like that. So you also sand down a bit of the neck just to fit in my custom printed not Deadpool, Red Hood head. By the way, this is a custom printed and sculpted by me. I 3D sculpted this in Blender, and then I printed it out. I have a couple of them still left over, so maybe I'll sell them, but yeah. So yeah, and it just fits in better with the neck, stuff like that. Looks really good to me. Yeah, so what we're going to be doing now is the filling slash sculpting phase. So what I'll be doing is just filling in big major holes or dents and stuff like that I couldn't really get out with sandpaper, because if I did use sandpaper, it might ruin too much of the sculpt. Yeah, so this thing needs to get filled in. You know, I need to do some sculpting here, and some other things need to get filled in. I can't remember where. I actually don't have the parts around. Okay, well, it doesn't matter. But yeah, the filling, sculpting, like these big gaps that we left here in between needs to get filled in. These need to get filled in and stuff like that. And I will be showing the process of that. But I just wanted to go through this part really quickly just to kind of give you an idea of the prep stage before the filling and sculpting phase. But yeah, that's about it for right now. We will be cutting to the sculpting. All right, so we are in the sculpting and filling phase, or bulking phase, or whatnot, right? So let me address the first thing, and it's what kind of sculpts I use. I've already talked about it before in my materials video here on Patreon, but the first one that I use mainly as the bulk, right? The bulking part, which is why it's called the bulking sculpting phase. But the bulking part, I use this right here, epoxy sculpt, or Aves epoxy. You get this on Amazon for pretty cheap, and it's like a very hard, like sturdy epoxy sculpt, so like dries up and turns into rock. And since it's pretty cheap and really sturdy, I use it as the bulking, and let me show you what the bulking looks like. So if you look right here, it's very choppy, the sculpt, right? But it gets the basic shape, and that's what the bulking phase is you basically bulk everything up. So I got the back musculature, and the way I kind of sculpt this is I, of course, use my favorite sculpting tool, toothpick. Thank you, Glenn Webb. Rest in peace, my man. But yeah, I use it like this, and I kind of just do things like rolling over, or if I wanted to like define more crevices, I go in and I kind of scrape away like this. You know, stuff like that. So like I'm trying to get like a little more edge here, like that. So I'm also following like this right here, like the drawing here on this other side. I try to copy it as much as I can. See, there's a little curve right here. I try to copy that over here, so I add like a little bit of a curve inside. It doesn't have to be pretty. Like I said, this is just the bulking. The refinement comes in the sculpting part of this phase, and that's when I'll be switching epoxy sculpts into a different one. Let me just get this down really quick. Alright, looks pretty okay. Yeah, that looks fine. All right. Yeah, like I said, you only work on one side because it gives you more grip, and it's just a lot easier. By the way, if you couldn't tell, this stuff takes a lot of patience. So yeah, that will be, yeah, that'll be about it. That's pretty satisfying, or at least good enough for me to satisfy me. And yeah, and I also filled it in with A's epoxy. Filled in that big old gap right there with A's epoxy because this is the cheaper sculpt and all that stuff. I think this only cost. I think A's cost me $8 ish for that. It's pretty small, but it's still cheaper than the sculpt that I mainly use for everything now, which is this stuff right here. The label's ripped off, but it's called Procreate. It's a flexible sculpting material. So depending on the ratio you mix, it becomes more flexible or more sturdy. I like to mix it 1-to-1. It's flexible enough and sturdy enough, and I prefer it that way. But yeah, that's what I'll be using to refine up everything. And the thing about the sculpting, especially when you want things to look really good and less work for yourself, is to continue to mess around with it. Just always mess around with it. There is, of course, a point where you have to stop. But for me, I like to sculpt, especially for Procreate here. I think it has an hour work time. I like to sculpt until that hour work time is over. Like I'm constantly messing with it until an hour goes by. So yeah, if you want to try that, you could. That's just how I like to do it. I like to mess around with it until it's no longer workable. Just because I feel like it leaves me less work later on when it comes to sanding and all that. But yeah, that's just what I kind of do. Once I get the rest of all the bulking down in the back, I'll show that off, and then we'll go into the sculpting phase, or sculpting part of this phase. But yeah, so that's the bulking. Show you one more time. I haven't bulked anything else yet. This is like, what is it? Okay, here, you know what? Let's talk about that. So this right here, since we already went in with an X-Acto, carved out the main base shape of everything, we don't have to go through the bulking phase. I just did this just to quick test to see if I still have, my skills. It's been a while, but yeah, that was just a quick test to see if I still had it. So I scraped out most of it, and I will scrape out the rest if I can. Yeah, kind of. Okay, well, yeah, but I'll clean it up later. But since we already have the main general shape here, we could go straight into the sculpting phase. So you can definitely get away with that kind of stuff. But like for like the back and stuff, it was way too flat and not enough material, so I have to bulk it up no matter what. But like the chest here, we could go straight into the sculpting phase, including the obliques and all that. We could go straight into the sculpting phase because we already, did most of the work beforehand by carving away at it during the cutting phase. So instead of like how a lot of people, I'm pretty sure, would do, which would be to Dremel the entire thing flat and then build up on it, I instead, cut away at the material to create the basic shape that I needed. So yeah, it saves you a lot of time, and it's the method I enjoy doing. So yeah, if you want to try it, go ahead. You're welcome, guys. But yeah, we'll get into the sculpting phase later, once I finish bulking everything up. Okay, so on to sculpting. So if you can see right here, I've already done some sculpting, pre-sculpting for the front half of the body because I was doing a little practice, trying to get back into it. It's been a while since I've sculpted, so yeah. But so I've gotten things like the obliques in on both sides already. Gotten the pectorals, what would you call it? Expanded out a little more, and this upper abdominal area, and that's all I've done. Nothing crazy, but yeah, it looks really rough right now, and that's fine. That will be was it fixed in the final stage, which will be our final phase, which will be the sanding or refining phase, where we just go in with sandpaper and just clean everything up everywhere. But yeah, so I'll probably add some more material here just to smoothen things out. I think I'll keep the lats, which is this part right here, as big as they are right now, just because for the last one I extended it out, I think about this much about, and it really stretched out the jacket that I had. So I don't want to do that anymore. I'm just going to keep it as slim as possible. That's why the back's pretty flat, but yeah. So what I'll be doing now is adding more material to these areas. Just going to fill it out. I'm going to start with one side. Like I said, always one side. I'm going to start with the right side here. And then once it's like hardened up, I'll do the left side. But yeah, I'm going to give you guys a little bit quick overview of how I do it with my favorite new sculpting material, which is Procreate right here. This is it. I mixed an even 50-50 ratio like usual, and I've worked it to now it's a really smoothish kind of tacky feeling. Yeah, it gets stuck to your finger pretty easily. That's why I need to like have water and stuff. I'm just gonna get off my finger. Yeah, there we go. Okay, but yeah, that's why I needed to use a lot of water and stuff like that just to make sure that it doesn't really stick like crazy. But yeah, so we're just gonna get into the sculpting of this now. Okay, so when it comes to how I sculpt or overlay my Procreate, so I have the base chunked out and stuff like that. And what I would usually do now is I take some Procreate, get some water, wet water, and then I would just flatten it out until it's something like this, right? Nice flat piece. And then all I have to do now is kind of just overlay it on top of what I already have sculpted. Just kind of get as much as of it I can over on top. See? Just get as much as I can over on top. Doesn't really have to be even or anything like that. Just gonna get it on top of there. Like that, right? Then I get my favorite sculpting utensil, toothpick, put some water on it as well to prevent sticking, and then I'll just kind of go in and push inside of the crevices that already been left over by the bulking. So, and then I'll do some rolling like this to kind of just bring out more of the shape. Wet my tool again. I'm just going to drag it down like this because you only need like a very thin layer since we've done most of the shaping already through the bulking. So we just need just a thin layer to get good enough shape. See, right here, this bottom area is being, you know, done again right here. Just like that. Make sure I bring out this section as well. Yeah, I'm going to adjust the camera just a bit. Yeah, looks better, okay. So yeah, and then just go in here, smoothing things out. Right now all I'm doing is just spreading it. I'm just spreading it and flattening as much as I can to make sure I don't add too much unnecessary bulk. That's one thing you need to avoid, unnecessary bulk, because then that just brings in more work for later in the sanding part of this. Because you know, you want to make it as less work as possible, alright? You want to make this as not as time consuming as it would be if you know, didn't do this kind of steps that I do. And everything I do here is to save time, or save time for me. I mean, if you want to do the whole sanding spiel, go ahead. I won't stop you, but if you want to save some time, then do what I'm doing. And that's try to avoid as much bulk. And also you want to make sure you don't leave any of that white. See the white kind of peeking through? So you just kind of scooch over some Procreate over and then overlap it right on top. You want to make sure you avoid as much peak as possible because you still want a fair amount of material on top to work with during sanding. You know, you don't want too little material. Otherwise you're just sanding away too much of the bulk. Alright, looking good. Up here a little bit. Oh, was that in camera? Oh shoot, that might not have been in shot. It's okay. You get to see it now. Right, always make sure to wet your tool as frequently as you can. Now you want to get in there and do a little swabby, just to smoothen things out a little bit more. Alright, so this is what I'm left with right now. Actually, hold up. Somewhere that I could kind of fix up just a bit. Like I mentioned before, I like to work with it until it's basically unusable or unsculptable. When the sculpting time runs out, that's how I like to do it. But for this, I'm just gonna make it as quick as possible so you don't see me go through that. Otherwise, this video would be an hour long. Okay, so we got in pretty much the base. Like I said, it doesn't have to be pretty. See, like in the front, not that pretty in the back either. Now, we need to go in and engrave these into here. So we just kind of guess where it's at. It's probably right around here. Yeah, okay, got it. So just right around here, just like that. And we guess where this one is. So it's probably right around here. Yep, got it. There you go. Get in there. Just gonna carve it out. Okay. And then it's kind of like that. And then we go in, same deal. Smoothing the corners out with that rolling over technique. Like that. Roll over it, smooth things out just a tad bit. Same on this side. Just try to keep the shape as much as possible. Wet the tool again. Like I said, frequently wet the tool. Always want to make sure to frequently wet the tool. Go in, do the rollover technique. Okay, enough of that. Now, what I like to do is to get my reference for more, what you call it, finer details. There you go. My reference is going to be Mafex Gambit here. So I'm looking at the back, put it right here. Actually, not put it in front of me, but I'm going to look at it and I'm going to try to replicate it as much as possible. It's always good to have reference. That way you know, at least know what you're doing when you're doing this stuff. I have references all the time. It's really good to have, just so I don't make any big, huge mistakes, and so that the product turns out as close as I want. Alright, is that in frame? Oh shoot, that wasn't even in frame, my bad. But yeah, now all I'm just doing is just kind of copying what Gambit has in terms of the definition of the shapes. It's got like this kind of more roundish look. These here as well. Round it up. Kind of deal. Over here. A little more like this. That's. Side's got more curve here. Alright, that looks pretty good. So yeah, nice. He's got that more curvish look. And now we want to work a little bit on this side, since I didn't really do anything on that side. Now we just want to go in and kind of simulate again what Gambit has. Follow this kind of shape and give it a little bit of a curve look. A little rollover technique. Just like that. Here a little more, this side of it, there. And that looks pretty good to me. I'm being honest, yep. Okay, I am pretty happy with that. Yeah, see? That's basically how I go through muscle sculpting. Yeah, let me get a little more. There, is that easier to see? Yeah, kind of like that. And then I'll just do the same thing for this side. I'll also, of course, add some more material in the lower lat area. If you see, oh shoot, focus. If you see, there's a lot. It's like, what is it? Pretty even in height here. But if you look at mine, it's missing that kind of height in that area. It's a big kind of gap. So I'll add more material here, just to even out and make it look more like this right here. It'll basically be the same way I've done already. Just lay on material and then roll over, roll over, roll over, roll over, and you know, position with the teeth, well, with like the tip of the toothpick and things like that. But yeah, so we'll come back once I finish all of that stuff. Alrighty, so We last left off on, you know, working on the back, and if you look closely now, I have finished up the back basically. Covered everything in sculpt. Covered everything in sculpt basically. It's all covered up. You can't really see much of the original body anymore, but yeah. So I did the same thing what I did on this side to this side. I just layered it on, and I kind of just sculpted around with a toothpick in the corners and nooks and crannies, and then left it really, how would you say, unrefined, so that when we go on to the next stage, of course, sanding, blah blah blah, we'll just make everything look really good and stuff like that. I also wanted to show you guys the abs. I have added all the sculpt to it as well, and I've done some, you know, personal adjustments and things like, oh, this side isn't completely dried here. I just added some sculpt to bulk it up, to even it out. That's one thing too. If you see some parts that don't look even, like this part was not even with this part. This side was actually a bit thinner compared to here, so I just added some to bulk it up a bit. And yeah, another important thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is to make sure things are aligned. Okay, so if you look at this right here, right, I'm holding this thing nice and straight, but look, the abs are facing in a different direction. Here, look, the back here, see this? Now we turn it without moving it. All right, see how misaligned those abs are? That's a big oofy goofy. You want to make sure things are aligned and that, you know, it looks proper, because man, when I do this, when I connect the abs to the torso, to the upper body, and I line up the front, right? Let me see here. All right, so the front looks lined up, looks really good up front, but then when you flip it around, look at that. It's just not lined up here. These aren't lined up at all. Look at that. Front looks great. Looks nice and aligned. Everything looks good in the front. God. That's definitely something to keep in mind, guys. Make sure you make sure things are nice and aligned, unlike me. But yeah, so I just did the same kind of technique, like I said earlier, just layered on the Procreate, and I just went in with the toothpick, of course incorrectly, blah blah blah, and I just kind of sculpted around. How I got these sharper edges, so I went like this, and I did like a kind of the roll technique like this, and I did that on like both sides. And then I ended up with this, and it looks very, very good. And now we're just going to move on to the sanding and refining phase. Okay, so next part is the refining phase. I already got a head start, and that was with like the abs here. So if you look, I've sanded down a lot of the side areas and cleaned it up so that it's more flush with the actual plastic. And it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. If you pay attention here, oops, if you pay attention here, it doesn't like look like perfect, and I could like push the toothpick up until it gets it. That's fine, because this whole thing will be primed and then sanded again. That's what the refinement phase basically is. It's sanding and then priming and then sanding again. But during the beginning of this, you want to make sure you get musculature as even as possible. So like you want to look at it all different kind of angles. Like these bumps right here, pretty even. I'm still going to sand it down to make it more smooth, but yeah, these are even. These over here look even. You want to look up here, look at the upper abs. See, there's a little bit of a higher ledge here compared to here, so this will get sanded down. And these seem to match up pretty well as well, so these are fine. But yeah, you want to make sure you do that. It saves you a lot of time later on. This whole process is all about saving time, but yeah. So for sanding like techniques here, so I usually fold up my sandpaper a lot, just so I have these harder, crisper edges that will allow me to get in there and just like kind of like really get the material sanded away, and keeping things like, if it's like really hard to reach corners like in there, you know, folding it like this is great to hitting those spots. And yeah, and I just kind of go like that, and like for these kind of edges, I kind of go in like this and sand away like that. Oh, also something you need to pay attention to is when to know when your sandpaper is used. Like for example, this one, I was just using this as an example of how I do the motions, but this right here is spent. There's no way I could really sand anything with this. A lot of people, especially me when I first started, would continue to use the same piece of sandpaper over and over and over again, and it just gets you nowhere. So you need to know when to start with a fresh new piece of sandpaper, because it just saves you a lot more time and it's a lot more effective in terms of getting rid of material. So yeah, fold it like this, and then we'll just pick this area right here. Actually, no, we'll sand the side that's a little higher, and we'll just go at it like this. go at it and then constantly check. See, a little bit more even. Let's go back in there again. Try to get it down. And pretty even. I mean, I'm pretty satisfied with that. I don't go for absolute perfection, but it's definitely pretty good. See that right there? This spot is spent, so you want to like keep moving it down across. It definitely wastes a lot of sandpaper, but it's definitely a lot more effective in terms of like taking off material and saving you time. Corner's already spent, so you can't really use that anymore. But yeah, that's basically what I do. I'll just kind of go in there and just get more material here. And I'll do a little more sanding just for you guys. Just a little more to show you guys what's up before I do this all off camera, because that's just faster for me. I mean, this is enough to give you guys a basic idea of what I do in terms of how I take care of the musculature. I will show you guys the final result after priming and sanding again. You just want to keep doing that, priming and sanding, because priming will help fill out the much harder areas to sand away. Because sometimes, let's say like this little area right here, that right there is not sanded, but if I keep taking away material, blah, 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 eventually it'll uneven things. So it's better just to hit it with a primer and then just sand away at the primer, and it'll just leave behind the primer in those tiny crevices like right here. And while keeping the musculature pretty even, like before you primed it, you know? But yeah. That's just basically the refining phase. It doesn't like take up it doesn't take that long to do. It's pretty easy as long as you get into the flow. Just sand and prime, sand and prime. But yeah, that's basically it. And we will go on to when this is finished. Alright, so I just want to show off what everything finally looks like after it's been sanded and yeah, basically sanded down. So here we go. We got the good old body done. So it's pretty roughish right now, but like I said, you need to prime and then sand again. So like here in the oblique area, it's pretty rough, but it's kind of difficult to tell whether or not I'm getting anything really done. So what I'll be doing is priming it and then sanding it back down, and I'll probably do that like twice, and I think that should be good enough. And if it's like too rough and I can't really sand it away, then I'll just take a small amount of Procreate and jam it in there and sculpt it in just to fill it out a little bit more, just to make it easier. But for right now, it's pretty much sanded down. I think it looks really good. And what the main priming could do, or main priming is supposed to do, is to make sure that areas like here where sculpt meets plastic comes out really smooth, because you can't see it now because it looks pretty smooth, but there's this tiny little lip that will show up right when you put paint on it. That's why you need to put primer over it, then sand it down until it's really, really smooth. Wait, let me show you the back. So here's the back all sanded down. Looks very good. I think that's a little, that's fine. Okay, but yeah, this is the back. I just went in and sanded all of it down, and I'm pretty happy with the result. Gonna be priming it up and getting it ready. But yeah, that's how basically I sculpt musculature. I don't really think I need to go into depth about the priming and sanding. It's all basic common knowledge. Like, you just prime it, then you just sand it till you're happy with how it looks. That's basically it. So I won't be recording that stuff. But yeah, that's how I sculpt musculature. Same thing for these areas. Well, these were molded and casted from the Red Hood V1. So bring them over here. So here's the version 1. And they're basically the same thing because I molded and casted it, because I just didn't want to sand it down. Or no, I didn't want to sculpt or do any kind of that kind of stuff. Forearms are different though. These forearms are actually molded and casted from the Mafex Gambit, because it matched in length and the musculature looked really good. So I just went with that. Yeah, it looks really good. But yeah, so this is basically my short tutorial. Well, I don't know how long it's going to be when I put it all together, but this is just my tutorial on how I sculpt musculature, and I hope that helped you guys out in getting into this. It's not too difficult. You just need to keep practicing and you'll eventually get it. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed.